Jessica, where's the line where Democrats go too far?
I certainly haven't seen it yet. I mean, making thoughtful comments about how this is a war that we chose to get involved in when one of our strongest allies pushed us in that direction, I don't think is anything but a factual assessment of what's going on here.
Sometimes the most revealing moments in political media happen when one voice challenges the consensus in the room. On The Five, Jessica Tarlov often plays that role. The lone liberal voice pushing back as the rest of the panel leans into tougher war rhetoric. And that contrast matters, because democracy depends on debate, not just agreement. If you believe facts and accountability should still guide our politics, consider subscribing. Now, let's look at what happened next.
Together.
Looks like Democrats' pathological hatred of President Trump is still alive and well. Kamala Harris and Gavin Newsom wasting no time in blasting Operation Epic Fury. Watch.
Donald Trump has dragged us into a war the American people do not want. If we want to stop Donald Trump with this random decision that he has arrived at, then Congress must act.
Reckless is the only way to describe this. He didn't describe to the American people what the end game is here. He didn't describe the existential threat of the moment, the immediacy of the crisis at hand. There wasn't one. He manufactured it.
And check out this glowing obituary of the Washington Post to Iran's now deceased murderous Ayatollah Khomeini, writing about his bushy white beard and easy smile, how he cut a more avuncular figure and was fond of Persian poetry and Les Mis.
Well, how did Les Mis turn out? I think they just found out.
This is a good point.
The Iranian version.
Yeah. So what, I mean, like the press, like they can't help themselves.
Yeah. I mean, the weird thing is that presumably that was written before. Right. So because as the way the obit offices work or departments work, you have big world leaders that everybody's got a file. And then they're like, oh, we forgot to mention that he killed 32,000 of his own citizens last month after they said that they wouldn't do anything after President Trump asked them not to. One of the things about the Democrats is the bat signal went out. The bat signal said, call this a war of choice. And you can go down the list and they all say war of choice. I think one of the things that people do also forget, in addition to the things we mentioned before, 46 Americans were killed on October 7th when Iran-backed Hamas went into Israel. And that decision by the Iranians and Hamas and Hezbollah to, well, maybe not as much Hezbollah, but Hamas, to take that action on October 7th led to all of this. Remember the pagers? Pagers exploding, all of it, because the Israelis said never again. And Biden said, okay, yeah, maybe never again, but we'll see if we can help you later. And President Trump said, oh, no, never again. And he meant it. I do wonder if any Democrat can tell us when is enough on Iran. John Fetterman, the senator from Pennsylvania, said, I'm sick of hearing Democrats saying no matter what, Iran can't have a nuclear weapon, but then not saying anything about what they would do to stop it. And I do believe that the whole world might rest a little bit easier knowing that Kamala Harris is not making these negotiations. If you think about the story that we did last week that said that the issue of Gaza really hurt her, right? So you can imagine that the Hamas caucus would have talked her out of something like this type of action. And that's also what she just displayed on the street corner.
Joey, you have a unique to this table perspective of having gone into war and had to suffer through hearing, or maybe you didn't, I don't know. But the idea that you have men and women going into battle right now, and they're listening to this carping back home, political carping back home, from people who are clearly trying to score political points, as you and your friends are perhaps willing to lay down their lives for that right to carp.
Yeah, we didn't listen to any of them. They were all talking heads. I didn't vote in a presidential election until McCain-Obama, and it's because I learned that McCain was a POW, and I thought that was kind of bad. I don't think this generation has that luxury. We didn't have smartphones, so we weren't checked into politics as a part of our personality. I couldn't tell you what the politics were of any of my buddies, except we all agreed on killing bad guys, and that was a hell of a lot of fun, as General Mattis said. So I think that in a lot of ways, maybe we were more ignorant, maybe we were less propagandized. I don't know. I think that a lot of folks right now in the military are excited. I think that Pete Hegseth has done a hell of a job returning the warrior. He said it in one of the latest comments. I think maybe it was at the press briefing. He said, we're not defenders, we're warriors. We are waging war on our terms to win the goals that we set and come home and celebrate. And that's the posture of this war. Listen, I understand the angst of looking back on the last 20 years of what wars in the Middle East were. But if I look back on the last 10 years and see everything that President Trump has done, from Maduro to Midnight Hammer to Qasem Soleimani, he strikes, he achieves an objective, and he brings our guys and gals home. I have to believe that's the plan here. I believe that having these Arab nations pissed off at Iran is a helpful tool in that when it comes to whatever rebuilding or whatever reconstituting the country of Iran turns into, because they've got a bigger risk here than we do if the regime reconstitutes itself.
Jessica, where's the line where Democrats go too far?
I certainly haven't seen it yet. I mean, making thoughtful comments about how this is a war that we chose to get involved in when one of our strongest allies pushed us in that direction, I don't think is anything but a factual assessment of what's going on here. And if J.D. Vance and Tulsi Gabbard weren't in the administration, they'd be on that same side. They'd be saying, focus at home. America first is about what's going on here. I mean, Tulsi Gabbard basically left the Democratic Party because of this, saying that Hillary Clinton was going to get us into these useless wars. We heard that in 2024 in the election, too, that Donald Trump is a peace president and Kamala Harris is the one who's going to take us down these routes. She even called it properly. She talked about, what he was going to do to the economy and that he was going to take us into war with Iran. If you go back to 2012, Trump is even tweeting about how Obama's poll numbers are so bad, he's going to launch a strike on Libya or Iran. And Stephen Miller also tweeting before the election that because Liz Cheney was Kamala's top advisor, which I don't think is true anyway, Liz wants to invade the whole Middle East. Kamala equals World War III. Trump equals peace. And I know he has the FIFA Peace Prize, and that is a big deal. But I think that committee would not be too happy with what has happened in the last few days.
Jesse, the fact that...
There's a moment in this discussion that really gives the game away. One of the panelists starts warning about propaganda, and that's striking, because look at the setting. A panel where nearly every voice is repeating the same pro-war framing, while the only real pushback comes from Jessica Tarlov. Here's what that reveals. When every viewpoint in the room moves in the same direction, criticism of propaganda can start to sound less like a warning and more like projection. And the reality outside the studio tells a very different story. Polling has consistently shown that a clear majority of Americans are wary of another military conflict. Depending on the survey, opposition to deeper involvement can range from roughly 60 to even 80%. That includes Democrats, independents, and yes, even some voters who supported Donald Trump. Which means the skepticism toward another war isn't just partisan, it's national. You can see that divide showing up in conservative media itself. Figures like Tucker Carlson, hardly a voice from the political left, have openly questioned the rush toward confrontation. When criticism is coming from across the political spectrum, it signals something important. The debate is far more complicated than the panel suggests. And then there's another contradiction worth noticing. Fox News often criticizes the media as if it exists somewhere else, as if it's an outside institution looking in. But networks with seats in White House press briefings, massive national audiences, and direct influence on political messaging are very much part of the media ecosystem they criticize. That doesn't make disagreement illegitimate. Debate is healthy in a democracy, but it does mean the audience deserves honesty about where narratives come from and how they're shaped. Because when powerful platforms present themselves as outsiders while actively shaping public opinion, that's a dynamic worth paying attention to. And that tension sets the stage for what comes next in the conversation.
Democrats were not making any of these arguments at the beginning of the Ukraine conflict. Makes me think that maybe it's all political on their part.
Right, so we tried to do what the Democrats wanted. We bribed the Iranians. We gave them all of this money, and it didn't stop them from enriching.
And we're at now.
We tried sanctions. We tried treaties. Trump tried bunker busters. And they've already acknowledged that this regime cannot ever get a nuclear weapon. And after all of these things we've tried, they're still enriching, stockpiling ballistic missiles, exporting terror, and threatening to shut down the straits. So the president says, you know what? If you guys aren't going to do anything, we've tried everything else. I'm going to take this one for the team. I'm going to do something. You don't have to back me up publicly, but I know deep down all these Democrats are very happy that I'm doing this. And they can calculate. If this thing goes bad, they can say, you know what? Trump's on the warpath, and you could just stick it to J.D. Vance. But if it is successful, and we have a military parade this summer on the 250th anniversary of this country, and the stock market rebounds, and everybody gets these fat tax refund checks, the Republicans have a very different story to tell before the midterms.
And of course, every future president will be able to thank him for that, taking it off their table, off their plate. All right, coming up next, President Trump is not ruling out boots on the ground in Iran.
And here's where the irony in this conversation becomes impossible to miss. On the 5, you have hosts like Jesse Waters framing the discussion around propaganda. But look at the panel dynamic itself. Nearly everyone at the table is reinforcing the same pro-war narrative, while Jessica Tarlov stands as the lone voice offering any meaningful pushback. That contrast tells you a lot. Because when an entire panel moves in the same direction, accusations of propaganda can start sounding less like a warning and more like projection. And the reality outside the Fox News studio is much more complicated. Polling suggests that a significant majority of Americans are skeptical about the United States being drawn into another war. Depending on the poll, opposition ranges from roughly 60 to 80% of the public. That includes Democrats, independents, and even some voters who supported Donald Trump. You can see that divide inside conservative media itself. Tucker Carlson, a former Fox News host and one of the most influential conservative commentators in the country, has openly questioned the push toward escalation, which raises an obvious question. Do the hosts on the 5, including Jesse Waters, really believe someone like Tucker Carlson is suddenly speaking for the political left? Of course not. And then there's another contradiction worth noticing. Fox News personalities frequently criticize the media, especially when discussing coverage of figures like Kamala Harris. But networks like Fox News are not outsiders looking in. They are a major part of the media ecosystem, with massive audiences, direct access to White House briefings, and enormous influence over how political narratives reach the public. So when commentators position themselves as if they're separate from the media, it creates a convenient illusion. In reality, they are helping shape the very narratives they claim to critique. And that's the context you need as Jesse Waters moves forward with his argument about Democrats and foreign policy.